starting from the top down. This is demonstration data, so some of it is, there's a lot of data in here, which is good for us to see. Acumatica has a lot of power to be able to do like a multi-division and multi-company. So you can see here that we have 3 companies and 4 branches. We have 2 companies, one's for products, one's for services, and there are various branches. And then we have a top-level company, which is kind of a consolidation company. So it really gives us a lot of power to create a complex hierarchy of companies, branches, and without having to necessarily use a sub-account structure to do that. Because we can create multiple companies and branches, we can also do intercompany transactions. So if we needed to give products from one branch to another, or we need to buy services from one branch to another, but we're probably not going to be exchanging cash on that since they're all under the same umbrella, Acumatica gives us that power to do that. Because Acumatica is a web-based, in the cloud type of service, it's not driven, your business date is not driven off of your system date on your computer. So Acumatica allows you to change the business date if need be. Now, don't worry, this is completely locked down by a role, so not anybody could go in and change that business date. But when you're processing a month end or year end and you need to move that date back, it sure makes it a lot simpler so you can eliminate some of that data entry as you're processing year end and month end financial transactions. Acumatica comes with a lot of dashboards out of the box. And so you can kind of see here, this is a financial flow showing the various transaction types that go into the database and then what the output is. It's important to kind of see here is that we have kind of a two-way street with external systems. We can do batch imports and exports. That means we can take transactions from our bank account and import that in, or journal entries from payroll. So it really gives us a little more flexibility to kind of go both ways with that database and organize our structure so that it's most beneficial to the way we do business. What's kind of fun about this one is that we can also click on these and they will take us to that module, and so they can be interactive as well. I'm going to jump over to the finance module itself here. So the heart of our ERP system is going to be our chart of accounts. We can't do anything in any ERP system without a chart of accounts to drive that. So let's take a look at the chart. Now, this chart of accounts you see is it's pretty comprehensive because there's a lot of data in here, which is good. But what you'll notice at the top is that we have a couple of key features that people tend to like. We can, whenever you see this in Acumatica where we can load records from a file, that means we can take a spreadsheet and we can map it here and we can bring that data in here and without having to hand key everyone. You can see here there's a lot of accounts. But likewise, we can also take just about any of these grids we see in Acumatica and export them to Excel, where we can deal with them, kind of create some ad hoc reporting if we need to. We have a standard account number, and I want to kind of point out that, like here, we have an AR account number, but we don't have accounts receivable for our products division and our services division. We just have one accounts receivable account. We can still report on them by division, but we don't need to have a different account to kind of separate out those AR among there, because we can separate it or roll it up as we need to do so. We have the account numbers here. The account class, what that is going to pertain to is the financial statements and how those are organized and how they print out and how you roll things up if you want to summarize, lump them together, how much detail you want to show. Of course, we have the type, and then coming out to the end, there's some other information. Some of it's not pertinent right now, but as you can see here, we can have multi-currency for different bank accounts and how we're going to revalue that. I can filter these out too. So anytime in Acumatica, when you see across the top, we can click on any of these and create a filter. So when we have lots of transactions, we may want to just say, I just want to see my income accounts, and filter that down quickly. Whatever you see, whatever your filters are applied, if you decide to export that, that's going to export only what you're seeing, not what you're seeing on the screen. You could have multiple rows and multiple pages, up to hundreds of records. It will take everything that meets that criteria, not just what you see on the screen. So, excuse me. So we're talking about the chart of accounts. If we take that a little bit deeper, we can take sub-accounts to kind of further manage our financial transactions and budgets. This can also apply into budgets. Acumatica does allow us 3 different segments in our sub-account groups. So this particular example is only showing 2. However, we are allowed up to 3. What's nice about this is if we've already created this sub-account structure, we can upload that into the system. Or we can, what will happen is when you configure your system and define what your sub-accounts look like, as you start to use them, this list will build by itself. So you can always use it as a reference. We jump over here. I talked a little bit at the beginning that, we might need to borrow some inventory from another branch or another company, or maybe one of our branches or companies is going to provide a service for us in our manufacturing process. We can come in here and we can create what we call this interbranch account mapping. So we're always going to have, what's our originating branch and then our destination branch, so that those transactions are going to clean out. They need to balance, so we need to wash them through an account so we don't actually have to go change, bill out to that other company and receive in with the PO. We can take care of those transactions by defining that in our interbranch account mapping. Well, let's take a little look at a few of the financial statements. If we look at a profit and loss statement here, I'll run that. So this is just a standard out-of-the-box report. As you can see, we had kind of talked about those account classes and how they lump them all together. Excuse me. Lump them all together in here. But when you run a report in Acumatica, you also don't have to, you can interact with this report, which I think is very unique. So in this case, you see we have sales revenue and we have numbers, and those are underlined in blue, and so therefore they become a link. And if we click on those, then we can go ahead and drill down into that information. It's going to pop it open. It's going to give me another report, and that report is going to give me all the detail for that as well. This is if we look at a rolling 20, there's a rolling 12 months here, and it's running a little slow. So in this case, we're taking a rolling 12-month P&L, breaking it out. We can drill into those transactions if we want and see that detail just like we could before. However, we can be a little dynamic with this type of reporting as well. So you see here, we're looking at the products group. And I can easily go ahead and, switch between that. I can look at the services company. I can look at the products company. I can look at a P&L just by branch if I want. Or I can take a whole consolidated report and look at the whole company in one big picture. Now, one thing that I really like is the ability to reclassify transactions. So if something gets placed in the wrong account or the wrong sub-account, This is a nice way to pull in a whole group of transactions all at once that might meet a certain criteria. So in this case, I'm going to pull up the Services East, and I want to look at everything that didn't get applied to a sub-account. So if I pull that in, and I can load all these transactions. And now I can take a look here, and some of these, it's like, well, there's not a lot. I didn't expect to find a lot. But there are maybe some that did not get applied to the sub-account that I wanted them to, or maybe somebody made a mistake somewhere and put something in a office expense instead of telephone expense. We can come in and make a change to these right all at once. We can see everything in one screen, and then we can also interact with it here in this screen as well. Now, what if you don't know your sub-account number? It does allow us to search in each segment and come through. So I'm going to go ahead and say, well, it really belongs to this sub-account. I can also search for it again, and yeah, it belongs to corporate. We're going to leave it there. I could change the transaction date if I want as well. When I've done that, I can process that. It gives me a new batch number. I drill into this and I look at the distributions. It gives it a type as a reclassification, so that if we ever wanted to see just the transactions that were reclassified for audit purposes, they would be easy to track down. And then you see here, and we have the accounts and then the debit and credit transactions that it's making to move that to the correct sub-account and make that classification. We can do many of them all at once. We don't have to do them just one at a time. But budgeting is also a big thing I'm seeing more and more of, and I think in this case, Acumatica handles budgets very, very well. And so we can budget down to the sub-account level. And so if we wanted to, we see, we're taking the whole year out for 2018. But what if we need to make an adjustment to that budget? We can kind of come through and say, well, I was expecting this. I'm going to change that amount. And I'm going to decide that I want to distribute this amount evenly across all 12 periods. So once I change my amount, if I hit distribute, I actually have a few options here of how I want to do that. Do I want to distribute it evenly among all 12 periods, or do I want to do it proportionally to the previous year? And I say OK, and now we can watch this, and everything is all changed across the board. Creating a new budget is also very quick and easy. We can come through and say we want to create a budget. We can budget by branch, create that new one, and what it will do is it will say it's going to preload all the budget from another budget, and we can take that budget and say, all right, I want to increase this to 10% over last year, and it will create that new budget for us, do the calculations, and then we can go in and modify it from there if we had some changes we needed to make. But you can also, you see here, we get a load records from file. So if you had, we're keeping track of budgets and maybe a spreadsheet that other departments, you didn't want them to have access to this, so other people were bringing in their budget information and giving it to you. You could compile it and upload it all at once. So we have a few dashboards that come out of the box here that Acumatica comes with. And all of these buttons and graphs and everything can be configured to be, the data behind it can be driven on whatever you would like. But it's also nice that we can say, we can change the colors on them based on certain criteria. So in this case, we have 38 overdue customers, and it's red. So it turned red because we wanted to bring it to our attention. we get a summary here, and if we click on more details, we can interact with that and we can drive that down into and see what makes up that data. And from there, we can interact on that even further. Back to this one. This is likewise over here. We get to see, you know, our cash position by month, and it's bringing it out, and we can just hover over it. Gives us the actual numbers if we want to see that. Our top, we can make this top 10, top 5 overdue balances, and then we can also drill into that as well to see what makes up that information on just that customer. We also have some role-based dashboards that are built in. And so these are kind of nice because they're filtering down just on the role that person holds. And we can kind of configure these and see, you know, where's our overdue accounts? Do we have a customer on credit hold that needs to get reviewed or released? Do we have orders that are ready to go into the invoicing processing? Again, we can go ahead and hover over these, interact with them, click on them, and make decisions based on that, maybe do some collection activity. And we'll just look at the AP side quickly. On the AP side of things, we can quickly take a look at what our projected cash needs are. You know, what do we need 7 days out, 30 days out, 60 days out? We can put it farther. We can look at, do we need some approvals? Are we waiting for something? So the beauty of this is, you know, instead of having to, someone doesn't have to go look for some of this information, we can feed it to them through a dashboard so that they know they have to take action on something. Jump over to accounts payable. So in the accounts payable module, this can get fed from a number of different ways, but we're going to just kind of go from a more general view today. The bills and adjustments. So in Acumatica, we call our payables our bills. And we have, as you can see here, there's a lot of data in here, 1,358 records. We have different statuses that pertain to these. So I think the statuses are very helpful when you're designing your business processes. So the 4 statuses that we have of any bill is an on hold, a balanced, an open, and a closed. So an on hold status means, you know, I'm not done with this. It's not ready to go yet. Maybe it's been generated from another module, so I know I need to review it. Balanced means this is ready to go. It's ready to hit the general ledger, but I'm not quite ready to send it there yet, or maybe I don't have the authority in my role to release that to the general ledger because it needs to go through another process. An open payable means just that. It's completely open. We have not paid it yet, but it has hit the general ledger. We have made the financial distribution. And a closed payable means it's completely paid and matched to a payment. So if we want to enter a new bill, it's a little bit slow today. It could be my internet. These are called documents also, a little definition training in Acumatica. So this particular document comes in an on-hold status. That is personal preference, depending on your business processes. I'm going to just throw a couple things in here. And so what's very nice about Acumatica is we don't have to memorize, vendor numbers. We can just start typing. And when it finds that number for us, it'll be a dynamic search. If we hit enter, it'll bring all that information in for us. So we have our header information here, and then if we come down into our document details, this is there's a lot of stuff here on this line. So if there's multi-branch, of course you would select the branch that you were you were in, it's going to default to the branch that I'm on. Doesn't mean I can't put multiple branches on here, but it will. That's where it will default. On the inventory ID, we won't always have an inventory ID. In this case, I can pick, these are going to be we could have a combination of stocked and non-stocked items. So in this case, this is not for any inventory, so I'm just going to bypass that. I can put a quantity or unit cost and have it calculate out, or I can skip both of those altogether and I can go ahead and just give it an amount. And then we have, the ledger account that you're going to assign that to. We don't have to know what that is. I could call it, do I have a payroll in here? No. Here we go. We'll call that professional fees for payroll. And if I need to change that sub-account, again, I can go ahead and search through in my segments and use that as well. So I don't have to remember what those are for. So you see at this stage, I have got a bill that is on hold. It is not ready to go. But at the top of my screen, I have some different options up here. We're going to see actions. So actions means what can I do with this bill now that it's in this status? Well, as you can see, because it's in a hold status, almost everything is grayed out, and that is by design because it is not in a position that I can take any action on this because it's on hold. If I take it off hold, it changed to a balance status. It's ready to go. Maybe this is part of my approval process. Someone needs to approve it before it goes to the general ledger. Well, now I have a couple of different things that I got one extra option now. I can add it to a schedule, which means maybe this is a recurring and I want to create this on a schedule. At this time, once I decide to release it, if I have the proper security to do that, now I have gone and created an open bill. Under my actions now, I get a few more options. If I did something incorrectly, I could reverse that bill and back it out. I could pay it from here, or maybe apply an adjustment, which maybe we want to apply a credit memo to it. We can do that right from this screen as well. On the financial details, I should have a batch number now that shows that I have posted that to the general ledger. So I can go in there and I can see exactly what that status is. This is in a posted status because we have opted to allow the general ledger to be posted upon release and not go through a separate step to update it. And then we can come in here and we can see what our distributions look like at this level. We also have some inquiries up here. In this case, this is my vendor details. So what our vendor details are going to show us is we're going to be able to go in here and say, what do I have open? By default, anytime we go into this inquiry from here, it's going to give us, filter it by the vendor that we picked. This is all periods, so we don't have to worry about filtering that down. Their balance is $500, and this is the one in the bill that's making up that $500. If I had more, if I wanted to see everything, I could go ahead and I want to see everything that I've ever done for this vendor, and I can get the entire list. You'll also notice up here at this point, if I wanted to, I could export that to Excel as well and go ahead and maybe create a report or an analysis using Excel. When I'm in this bill, I have a few other options, things that I can kind of jump around and do. There's a pencil right here, and so if I open that, that's going to open up my vendor maintenance in a whole new window. Could be a number of reasons to do that. So taking a look at our vendor maintenance here, what's very nice about this is we have different statuses for our vendors. We can change those. We can put them on hold or just hold payments or make them inactive so that we can filter them out on our searches so we're not paging through vendors that we don't use anymore. we see our balance right up at the top of the screen. So quickly we can say, okay, I owe this vendor $500. If I had a prepayment that I would apply to that, it's possible to prepay that vendor and get your invoices later, then we would see that prepay balance, and then we could kind of take it off of there as we got invoices from them and keep track of what we've prepaid. On the payment settings, this is nice because we can go into our default payment settings by vendor, and there's many different ways that we do pay our vendors. Sometimes we cut them a check, sometimes we pay them by ACH, maybe we have foreign vendors, we do a wire, and so what we can do at that point is define how we're going to pay that vendor so it comes up in the right screens at the right times when we're ready to pay them. On the purchase settings, this is where we kind of make the flags if we're going to, when we purchase from this vendor and we need to maybe send them a PO, are we going to print the orders or do we send them by email? That's very important for purchase vendors. If neither one of those are checked, it's not going to queue it to be printed. Doesn't mean you can't, but it won't be in the queue. So this is very helpful if you're going to do any kind of bulk processing of those kind of orders. Now, by now, some of this should be looking kind of familiar. We're seeing we have actions that we can take from the vendor at this level, inquiries and reports that we can run. So if we look at the actions here, we're going to get a list of the very common things that we might need to do when we're in a vendor maintenance screen. So we might need to enter a bill for them. We can do that from here or cut a check. You'll see something here that's kind of interesting where it says extend to customer. So in Acumatica, we would have to extend that vendor to a customer in order to take money from them. However, when it does that, it will create a customer record with the exact same ID as the vendor ID. So it's very easy to keep that all together. What you also see under here is that we have the ability to change an ID. That can be helpful if you have a certain type of numbering sequence that you'd like to use in your organization where you manually assign your vendor IDs, and maybe somebody did it wrong. You don't have to recreate the wheel on that. You can just go ahead and recode that. Under inquiries, we have a few more options than we did under our bill, but we can go to that vendor details screen again and see what their opens are. If we need to approve their bills for payment, if they are that kind of vendor, we can get to that, or go ahead and pay the bills, or if we have a specific price list for that vendor that we have uploaded into Acumatica, we can get to it right from here as well without having to navigate anywhere else. Under reports, we can run an aging and look at our vendor history and get to all the commonly used reports that we would generally need from there. So I kind of mentioned under, approvals. So let's just take a quick look at some approval mapping. In Acumatica, we have assignment and approval maps. These apply, as you can see, all over the organization, but in this particular case, I am going to pull up this AP multi-line approval. So we can set a number of steps or requirements of at what point do we need to have an approval on an AP bill. In this case, this has line approvals by department. So if an expense came through and it needed to be approved by department, then we have those rules. If it's not an expense, it doesn't meet that, we have vendor-specific approvals. So in this case here, you can see, well, we have, if we put in for this particular vendor, that vendor always needs an approval by somebody. And we say, who is the person to do that approval? And so that person would have to approve that bill in order for it to get paid. Or, okay, it doesn't meet that criteria, so we're going to go through and say, okay, at this level, this is we need all bills over $1,000 need to have approval. I'm going to jump over to accounts receivable. And now that we got this far, you're probably thinking some of this looks pretty familiar, and it should. And that is one of the really nice things about Acumatica is that there's a lot of consistency in how everything looks and feels and works. So on the payable side, we had bills and adjustments. On the receivable side, we have invoices and memos. And there's a lot of records you can see here. We get a record count down at the bottom of the screen. So we have 2,900, almost 3,000 records in this database. So sometimes it can, well, it's my computer that's being slow to load today, so don't let that discourage you. Again, looking at the statuses, you see that we have the same statuses that we had on the accounts payable side. On hold, balanced, open and closed. On hold means the same thing. We're not ready to, this is not ready to go anywhere, or maybe it requires an approval at that step, or we want someone to look at it or verify it. An open invoice, we just haven't received payment on it yet. A closed invoice, we have received payment on it. And then, of course, we have a balanced one. So I'm going to take this particular invoice and create a new one. Another little shortcut that we have in Acumatica is we can go ahead and we can copy a previous invoice, and then when we create a new invoice, we can paste that in there, and it will pop everything in just the way it was. Of course, it does with the date as well, too, so we certainly want to create a different date. So that particular invoice. If we want to create a description in there, we can. We have a lot of fields that we can use for our. We have a customer order and then a description. We can make them mandatory, not make them mandatory based on the preferences. In here, we took a deposit, but we're gonna make that just 10,000. Change that, and we can save that. So now we have an invoice and a balance status. Now we should be getting kind of a rhythm here on how this works. From here, we could go ahead and send that, email that invoice or memo. When we do from the actions, when we tell it to email something, it goes into the Acumatica system to email it out. You don't have to interact with this in any other way. It just goes into a queue, and that runs on a schedule, and it will just get emailed out. So it doesn't bring up another box or anything for you to have to interact with. It's going to email it to what's on file. Again, we can add to a schedule. Maybe this is a recurring type of invoice that we need to create on a schedule. We can do that as well. So in this case, you see this mark as do not email. That says, well, this customer requires an emailed invoice, but I'm not going to email this one. So I would mark it as do not email. I don't want this one to go out. Under inquiries, we're going to see a lot of the same things here. So I have a list I can see of what my open documents are for this particular account. Now here, it's only showing the one open document because we have not released the other one. So I could also add that one in here as well, so I can see that's in a balance status, and I want to see what that grand total is. Even though my current balance is this, we have a balance discrepancy. That discrepancy exists because we have an unreleased AR document out there. And then our reports as well. We can create a printed invoice or memo from here, and at that point we could email that if we wanted to add a special note. we didn't want the system to automatically kick it out with a predefined message that goes with it, and we wanted to put our own message, we could do that from here as well. I'm going to go ahead and release that transaction. And now if I go to the financial details, I have been given a batch number, and that batch number I can always drill into and look at the distributions, make sure they're correct. Like we saw in vendors, we can do the same thing in customers and open our customer maintenance screen right from the bills. Always another handy way to do this. You see up here, I have a balance of $280,000 for this customer. I see that right off the bat. Up at the top, I have different statuses that I can use for these customers, and I can change them. I can put them on credit hold. I can make them inactive if they're no longer a customer of mine or we're not going to do business anymore. There are a few other options in here that I kind of want to look at. So the delivery settings. The delivery settings has a few unique things. A lot of these are defaults, so when we enter an invoice or a memo or even a sales order for this customer, some of these are going to come into play. One thing I kind of wanted to look at is like the shipping rule. Shipping rules are by customer. We can also change them by line, but if we are shipping to a customer, we can specify a rule that works really well. So do we allow back orders on something? Do we ship it complete, meaning it won't show up, we can't create a shipment for it until everything is there? Or if we ship a partial, do we cancel the remainder? And this can be at the customer level or any level, but this is kind of the default, and I think this is a nice feature of Acumatica. In Acumatica, kind of come back to terminology, we have locations. Locations are our alternate shipping addresses, so they're the various locations or ship tos for that customer. So we can create as many ship tos as we need, and then of course make a default one, which will always be in there, but this is where we would specify that. Same with contacts. This is where we would keep track of all the various contacts that exist for this particular customer. Salespeople, we would assign a default salesperson, but we would also be able to have additional salespeople on this account as well. Like we saw, we have actions we can take when we're at the customer level. So if it's part of the process that we start at this, we can also go in, we can create new invoices and memos, we can create new sales orders or take payments or write off balances or even extend them to a vendor if we need to pay them or maybe give them a refund of something. We would need to extend them to a vendor for that. This really eliminates the need to have to bounce in and out of various screens to do certain work. Inquiries, we have a lot of options here because we have a lot of features enabled in this system, but customer details and the statement history and maybe the sales prices. So the sales prices, we can create custom price lists for our customers that pertain to when they buy certain items or maybe they get a certain discount on certain things or quantity breaks. We would do all that through sales prices so we can access that information at that time. And then, of course, we see we have some reports as well. We can look at our AR balance by customer or pull an AR aging from here without having to bounce out of another screen. If I go back to my customer details again, now because I had released that invoice, we're seeing that in there. So that is all I have for you today on this demo. I'll turn it back to Alex.
All right. Thank you very much, Kristen. Looks like we do have a couple questions here for you. So to start off, we've got what type of reporting does Acumatica use? SSRS question mark, and are they customizable?
Acumatica does not use SSRS. They do have a report designer that they have built in, and that is absolutely customizable, or you can create your own reports. In addition, you can create queries. You know, a lot of us are used to working in SQL and creating our own queries behind that. We can create what they call generic inquiries in Acumatica, and then we can use those to drop those fields and build those reports that we will launch through the interface. So when you see reports, or the ones that we kind of looked at, those are reports. And then if we're looking at the financial statements, that is built a little bit differently using some of these report definitions because they have a little more complexity to them.
Okay. Another question here. Is there a way to mass process transactions as opposed to one at a time?
Absolutely. That's an excellent question. What I see a lot, is maybe we want to do we know all the AP bills are good and someone just has to release them. We can do that by Acumatica has this in a lot of different modules where we have certain processes. And so in those processes, we can go ahead and generate, we can find many documents all at once. And so in here, these are all the balanced AP records. It's already saying, okay, these are balanced and ready to go. I can kind of go through and be like, oh, yep, that power bill's good. That one's good. Take a look at it. Yep, rent can go. And I can either release them all or release them one at a time instead of having to go and look at each individual one.
All right, very cool. Here's another question. Can I create my own filters without affecting anyone else?
Yes, that's what's really powerful about Acumatica. If we came in here and we're looking at bills and adjustments, and maybe for some reason you just, you want to create a filter so that you only see for just this vendor, or maybe, here's a really common one. We're just going to do open, right? Every time I open this screen, I don't want to see everything. I just want to see my open ones. So Acumatica does give us the power to say, to create these kind of filters for us. And when I did that, I spelled it wrong now. I missed that other L. We get it, we can kind of go back and forth and say yes. And this will be only on my screen. But I also have the option to say, yep, I'm sharing this, and it will show up on everybody's screen. So you can create make these screens work for you in the way that you do your work most efficiently.
Okay. Got one more question. Everybody, again, feel free to continue submitting them if you have any. How do I keep employees from seeing financial information we prefer they don't, such as payroll?
That's a lot of people have accounting departments, where the people who work in the accounting department are not privy to every single piece of financial information, and that's very common. And so Acumatica does that very well for us. But they do that with the use of what they call restriction groups. And so you can kind of see, like this one here says, these are, these with the checkbox are secured. So if I look at those restriction groups from here, I can say, okay, for this particular account, we are blocking non-finance people from seeing cash accounts. So we're doing that based on a role, a finance role, and we can say, no, you're not, non-finance people cannot see these accounts. So they won't even know they exist if they went to look at the chart of accounts. Because a lot of times we want to be able to have that power to say, yep, I need you to have access to, almost everything, but you don't need to have access to everything because some of it is confidential and we don't want to share it with everyone.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right. Well, I think that is all the questions we've got for today so far. But of course, feel free to reach out to us and Kristen directly if you'd like with additional questions, and happy to discuss Acumatica for you specifically. So again, thank you everyone for joining this afternoon, and please have a wonderful weekend. Thanks.
Thank you.